Previously, we saw Eliezer of Damascus going on a journey to find a wife for his master's son. What a glorious story. And we're moving forward. Genesis 25:1. Abraham took another wife, and her name was Keturah. So we have Isaac getting a wife, and we have Abraham taking on a new one. It is not good for one to be alone, as it says in the scriptures, so it's good to be married. Genesis 25:2. And she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shion. It looks like we are going to enter another phase of some intense genealogies, and that's okay. Genesis 25:3. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Debian. The sons of Debian were Ashrum, Eshium, and Leumiman. 25:4. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abidid, and Eldah. All these were the children of Keturah. We don't know the names of any of the daughters, if they had any. They're not mentioned here. It just lists the sons. So there we go. There's a nice big family. But how is that going to affect the inheritance? Well, we'll find out. Genesis 25:5. And Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. Abraham is giving what he has to Isaac, for Isaac is the only true son of Abraham. He is the son that was spoken of by God, and the one from his first wife, his true wife of Sarah. So it's something special, something to be set apart, not to be conflated with the rest. And when we read of him sending away Ishmael, it was not as if he was throwing out someone he had no interest in or didn't care about at all. He still loved Ishmael, but Ishmael was getting in the way of Isaac and the development of Isaac into becoming the person that God needs Isaac to be. So it's sad, but it's what needed to be done for good to happen in this world. Genesis 25:6. But to the sons of his concubines, Hagar and Keturah, Abraham gave gifts, and while he was still living, he sent them to the east country, away from Isaac, his son of promise. The fate of these other lads is similar to what happened with Ishmael, in that they had to be removed from the area and sent away. It's not like they were sent away into bondage or into just an awful life or living situation. It was just they had to be doing their best somewhere else, so Isaac could have his proper inheritance and not have to fight for his brothers for it, for if they were there, who knows what would happen. Genesis 25:7. The days of Abraham's life were 175 years. Genesis 25:8. Then Abraham's spirit was released, and he died at a good old, ample, full old age, an old man, satisfied and satiated, and was gathered to his people. So Abraham, he lived quite an incredible life. He fathered a couple children that are going to become nations. He traveled around. He got into a whole bunch of different misadventures. Him and his first wife, Sarah, they had a grand old time doing all this cool stuff. But the greatest thing with Abraham is not the adventures he went on, or the nations that are going to come from him, or the great wealth that he accumulated from his superior business knowledge and ability. The greatest thing of Abraham was his relationship with God and his ability to trust God completely and let God lead his life and direct him and try to do the best that he could, and just kind of trusting in God. That's just the most incredible aspect of Abraham. And you can see it in his servant Eliezer of Damascus, just how Eliezer Damascus acts as a reflection of how Abraham was with Abraham's relationship to God. that it kind of probably permeated through his household, that it really benefited all those around him. If you look at secular history around this nation, like the nations around where Abraham was, it's a pretty wicked place. Like Sodom and Gomorrah, it was destroyed for its wickedness, for one thing, but there was other nations around that were sacrificing their children to idols and burning their children. So a lot of wicked stuff. And Abraham was different with his actions, for he was a follower of the Creator God and had to live up to a higher standard. Genesis 25:9. And his son Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zor the Hittite, which is east of Menor. 25:10. The field which Abraham purchased from the Hittites, there Abraham was buried with Sarah his wife. So the two sons got back together, Ishmael and Isaac. They put their bad blood, I assume it's bad blood. They had kind of a rocky relationship. I mean, Ishmael was kind of kicked out of the house because he was bullying Isaac, right? So they put away their bad relationship and they got together to bury their father. And they're going to bury him in the same place that Sarah was buried. That is going to be the family plot, as they say. The place to bury the family members. So that's what we got going on here. Genesis 25:11. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac. And Isaac dwelt in Beer Isharo, a well of the living one who sees me. So that same well from before, Isaac is going to be dwelling. We'll follow that up with a nice genealogy. Genesis 25:12. Now, this is the history of the descendants of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bore to Abraham. There's no question in who this is talking about. I like how the word spends time to focus on being exact and specific when it comes to the genealogy, so you can't mistake this Ishmael for another Ishmael. Genesis 25:13. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their births. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kadgar, Abel, Mibsam. 25:14. Mishma, Dumha, Masa. 25:15. Hadad, Tamah, Jet-ur, Naphash, and Kedemah. Well, those are certainly some names, and they are indeed in the order that were written in. Okay, Genesis 25:16. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are the names by their village, by their encampments, sheepfolk. 12 princes according to their tribes. Okay, so there is certainly 12 sons of Ishmael, and I think it's saying that their encampments, like where they dwelt, was named after them as well. I think that's what that's saying, but I'm not 100% certain with true conviction. Let's move on and we'll see if we get more details. Genesis 25:17. And Ishmael lived 137 years. Then his spirit left him, and he died and was gathered to his kindred. Not entirely sure what that last part is there. And was gathered to his kindred. Does that mean that his children got together for a funeral for him, maybe? I mean, 137 years, that's a pretty long life. And then his spirit left, so he died. And he was gathered to his kindred. I think that's what it is, that his kids got together for kind of a funeral, but I don't know. It's a weird way of writing that. Genesis 25:18. And Ishmael's sons dwelt from Havel to Shur, which is before Egypt in the direction of Assyria. Ishmael dwelt close to the lands of all of his brethren. So they're kind of in that generalized area, and he's kind of in that area as well. Okay, so that's just kind of a location thing. So they spread out a bit, but they didn't go like crazy on their spreading, that they didn't just go all over the place. They were all kind of in the same area. It's nice having your family in the same area. I know out here in like the Americas, like North America or whatever it is, that, you know, if your family is within a couple hour drive, you can go see them on a weekend and it's no big deal. Whereas in Europe, if they're 40 minutes away, it's like you see them on Christmas and that might be it, right? Like the perception of distance is different here in America than it is in Europe. And I would think that the perception of distance, however it was away from their families, that it was probably like a couple days or so many days away from each other, so that they could maybe get together every year a couple of times or something, that they weren't so far away that it was not such an arduous journey that they never got to see each other anymore. Maybe they had messengers going back and forth and traders or whatever, so they would still hear from each other, but they weren't so far away that it wasn't like nobody had anything to do with anybody anymore, because that is definitely a risk of something that can occur. And we'll move on and look on Isaac. Genesis 25:19. And this is the history of the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Again, it is clarifying who Isaac is and which Isaac in specific we're talking about, because the Bible doesn't want to leave room for misinterpretation or misunderstanding. Genesis 25:20. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean. We just saw this in the previous episode when that all kind of went down, so that's still fresh in our minds. What a journey. Genesis 25:21. And Isaac prayed much to the Lord for his wife, because she was unable to bear children. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife became pregnant. That seems similar to Abraham. At least he didn't have to wait as many years as Abraham did. But that's just kind of interesting how that happened. I wonder if there was some sort of predisposition or something from the family members of Abram's house, or Abram's father's house or something, because Sarai was the sister of Abraham, well, half sister, and this girl Rebekah, she was also from that household, probably more distant of a relative to Isaac than Sarai was to Abraham. So that's just kind of interesting. I don't know if there's anything that you could make of that. Probably not, and that would probably be a foolish thing to do, but that is an interesting thing of note. Or it's a repeater of a pattern that it's kind of a commonality, that when you have difficulty having a child, that child that you end up having in the end is much more appreciated when you had difficulty in the conception, as opposed to oops, there he is. So we'll see. Genesis 25:22. Two children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is so that the Lord has heard our prayer, why am I like this? And she went to inquire of the Lord. So she's pregnant, and she's having a real rough time with it. That too is added by the translator, but it makes a lot more sense when we read the next line. So anyway, she's having a rough pregnancy. They're really riled up. So what's going on here? Genesis 25:23. The Lord said to her, the founders of two nations are in your womb, and the separation of two peoples has begun in your body. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. So she is going to give birth to some twins, and the elder will serve the younger. Now that is a really weird thing to say, because typically speaking, or the standard of the culture of the time, and I guess the standard throughout most of time and in most situations, that the older brother kind of has the more say, and it's the younger that kind of has to follow suit. But this is going to be a reversal of that, so this is kind of dramatic and significant. Genesis 25:25. The first one to come out was red all over, like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau, which means hairy. 25:26. Afterward, his brother came out, his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Supplanter. Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. We got a lot going on here. So we got this conflict between these two sons, Esau and Jacob. And they're fighting in the womb, and that's just a hard pregnancy as a result. And even when Esau is first born, Jacob is grabbing his heel to drag him back in to give him another round. Just the conflict has begun before they're even born. That's just crazy and wild. And then the second part of this verse, when it says Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them, he was married at 40, so 20 years. It took 20 years for her to conceive and have these kids. So that is definitely a long time from when he got first married to when they had their first set of kids. So it's quite a journey. So we got two things going on here. We got these conflict of these kids and Isaac being a father, just like his old man was. And now we're going to look a little bit more at these kids. Genesis 25:27. When the boys grew up, Esau was a cunning and skilled hunter, a man of the outdoors, but Jacob was a plain and quiet man, dwelling in tents. So in our modern vernacular, we would say that Esau is the extrovert, the outdoorsman, having a good time outdoors, and then we got Jacob over here on the other hand, the introvert who's a shut-in, dwelling in tents. So maybe he was inside the tent reading his book, or whatever. He wasn't very exciting or interesting as it describes, but I'm sure he was in his own way. Just probably from an outside appearance, he probably seemed quite boring compared to his wild older brother, who's not older by much time at all. His older brother Harry, that troublemaking rascal who was an outdoorsman, right? Genesis 25:28. And Isaac loved and was partial to Esau, because he ate Esau's game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. This seems like a standardized, normalized human corporeal experience, doesn't it? Where you have one parent loving one more than the other, and the other loving the other one more than the first. So it's not really how it's supposed to be. There should be kind of a generalized equalization of the distribution of love points between the children, loving your kids equally and not really showing favoritism to one over another. It builds resentment, it creates strife, it causes all kinds of problems. Granted, it's probably very hard to do that. I don't know firsthand. It's kind of a bit of a presumption. I don't have any children, so it's hard to say. But I do understand that being treated different is, especially by a guardian, someone who's kind of looks after you and is guiding you and giving you direction, how that could really mess you up as a child, being treated as lesser. Genesis 25:29. Jacob was boiling pottage, lentil stew, one day when Esau came in from the field and was faint with hunger. So here we go. We got the homebody Jacob. He's in home. He's cooking up some stew, and his brother comes in, and his brother's quite famished. Genesis 25:30. And Esau said to Jacob, I beg of you, let me have some of that red lentil stew to eat, for I am famished. That is why his name was called Edom, meaning red. 25:31. Jacob answered, Then sell me today your birthright, the rights of a firstborn. So this is kind of a ridiculous situation. So we have the outdoorsman, the hunter, going around there, and he comes back. Maybe he didn't catch what he was looking for or didn't forage enough. whatever the case may be. Maybe he was just lazy. And he comes in and he's just starving. He's hungry. Doesn't even say that he is like crazy hungry. I guess he's faint, so maybe he hasn't eaten in a while and he's kind of feeling a little bit weak. Maybe he was like hunting and he couldn't catch anything for multiple days or something, and he was just kind of weakened as a result. So he was, I don't know. He was either really hungry and faint, or maybe just a little hungry and faint. It doesn't really specify the severity of his faintness. And the story works both ways. It's just one seems a little bit more ridiculous than the other. So he comes in here, comes to see his brother, and his brother is making stew at the time. And he's like, oh, can I have some of that stew? And, you know, you got the younger brother here. He's like, well, you can have some, but sell me your birthright. Sell me the rights of the firstborn. What a negotiation strategy. This is 25:33. Jacob said, swear to me today that you are selling it to me. And he swore to Jacob and sold him his birthright. Genesis 25:34. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. And he ate and drank and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau scorned birthright as beneath his notice. So we don't know the degree of faintness that was within Esau. I mean, it does say that he was faint, and maybe it was that he hasn't eaten in days and was just really starving, just a little bit above death's door, and he would do anything for food. But I don't think that's the case. I think this is something much more pathetic and weak than that maybe he hasn't eaten and he's just feeling a little bit weak and famished, and not really, caring about his birthright or thinking about the future in the respect to his birthright, as well as the possibility not thinking that he could actually sell his birthright, that because his father loved him, that he would give it to him regardless and he wouldn't let him transfer it to his younger brother. So it could be some sort of dynamic that way, that either it was a true weakness and a true need for food, or it was something more pathetic that he just didn't think it through, sold his birthright to his younger brother. So I don't know. I don't know how that exactly goes down. I mean, you could have elements of both, right? That somewhere in the middle of that as well. So I don't know exactly how that went down, but to sell your birthright for a pot of stew seems pretty ridiculous. Was there nowhere else he could go? Nowhere else he could scavenge some food? Did they not have other people around that he could have got something from? To me, it seems like there was an element of laziness, that he smelt this stew, it smelt really good, and he was really hungry, and he just signed away his birthright. And we'll see what happens there. Either way, we are at the end of the chapter, and that's something to think about. Having listened to this back, maybe he was just an idiot and didn't think anything through at all. He was just looking at the here and now, looking for something to help him in the immediate intern, but not looking at the future prospects or ramifications of his actions.